Okay. Okay. The first massive African American protest in American history was held on July 28, 1917, where children in New York City participated in the silent protest parade against the East St. Louis riots. Between 8,000 and 10,000 African Americans marched against lynching and anti-Black violence in a protest. The march was precipitated by the East St. Louis riot of May and July of that year, which was an outbreak of labor and race-related violence that caused up to 200 deaths and extensive property damage. The parade was organized by the NAACP and famous civil rights activist W.E.B. Du Bois, who was also the first African American to earn a doctorate from Harvard University. The protesters hoped to influence President Woodrow Wilson to carry through on his election promises to African American voters to implement anti-lynching legislation and to promote Black cases. To the great horror of civil rights activists across the country, Wilson went back on his promises, and federal discrimination actually increased during his presidency. The silent protest parade was the first parade of its kind in New York and the second public civil rights demonstration of African Americans. The paraders assembled at 59th Street and 5th Avenue and marched 36 blocks downtown to Madison Square Park. They were led by 800 children, some no older than 6, dressed entirely in white. Following the children were white-clad women, then rows of men dressed in black. The marchers walked wordlessly to the sound of muffled drum beats. Despite their silence, their concerns were articulated on neatly stenciled banners and signs. The banners and signs read, "Mother, do lynchers go to heaven? Give me a chance to live. Treat us so that we may love our country. Mr. President, why not make America safe for democracy?" And "Your hands are full of blood."
In addition to civil rights protests, there are other kinds of protests. A protest is an expression of bearing witness on behalf of a particular case by using words or actions with regards to particular events, policies, or situations. Protests can take many different forms, from individual statements to mass demonstrations.
Hold on. Who has a house band at a protest? Oh, stop. That's enough. Come on now. Come on. Hey, little Jimmy, what are you protesting? Where your daddy at? Huh? No. Not on Officer Willie Earl's watch. No, stop. That's enough. Come on, somebody. Stop. I know your daddy. Come on, that's enough.
A social movement is a type of group action. There is no single consensus definition of a social movement. There are large, sometimes informal, groupings of individuals or organizations which focus on specific political or social issues. In other words, they carry out, resist, or undo a social change. They provide a way of social change from the bottom within nations. Our young protesters here today are protesting things like bullying, equality for girls, Black Lives Matter, and protecting our environment.
African Americans have held protests for many reasons, and some of you may remember the protests for the Central Park 5 to be released. In 2019, the television miniseries When They See Us brought to light the injustice of 5 young men. When They See Us is based on events of the April 19, 1989 Central Park drug case and explores the lives of the 5 suspects who were prosecuted on charges related to the sexual assault of a 28-year-old female jogger. She was brutally attacked and raped in New York Central Park. She was found unconscious with her skull fractured, her body temperature at 84 degrees, and 75% of her blood drained from her body. When she recovered, she had no memory of the assault. Initial police investigations quickly focused on a group of African Americans and Latino youths who were in police custody for a series of other attacks that had happened in the park that night. The 5 juvenile males of color, Kevin Richardson, Antron McCray, Yusuf Salon, Corey Wise, and Raymond Santana, were divided by the prosecutor into 2 groups for trial. Each youth was convicted by juries of various charges related to the assault. 4 were convicted of rape. They were sentenced to maximum terms for juveniles, except for Corey Wise, who was 16 at the time of the crime and treated as an adult by the legal system. He was held in adult facilities and served his time in adult prison. In early 2002, Matthias Reyes, a convicted murderer and rapist, admitted that he alone was responsible for the attack on the Central Park jogger. The 5 who had been convicted for the crime filed a suit against the city in 2003 for wrongful conviction and were awarded a settlement in 2014. Here is a snapshot of the lives of each of the young men who are called the Central Park 5.
Kevin Richardson was only 14 years old when he was arrested in connection to the 1989 Central Park jogger case. Richardson was tried as a juvenile and he was convicted of attempt murder, rape, sodomy, and robbery. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. He served 5.5 years. Before he was wrongfully incarcerated as one of the Central Park 5, Kevin Richardson had a dream for his future of playing basketball for Syracuse University's Orangemen. As a child in the 1980s, Richardson and his friends were big fans of college basketball. He admired Syracuse players such as Dwayne Pearl Washington and Billy Owens, and he dreamed about escaping New York to go to college upstate. Richardson's goal of attending Syracuse was shattered in April 1989, but today he has been honored with a scholarship in his name at Syracuse University. He leaves a legacy there for future generations. He has also worked to push criminal justice reform efforts in New York City over the years.
Raymond Santana was only 14 years old when he was arrested. He found his passion growing up in Harlem on 111th Street between Park and Madison Avenues, which is now the name of his new clothing line. When he was 13 years old, he loved to draw, which he now credits as the inspiration behind his collection. Santana spent 5 years in prison for a crime he did not commit, losing the years left in his youth, as well as the joy he found in drawing. After having lunch with Rashid Young, president of Run Athletics, he realized it was time to find his passion again. Santana had the financial means from his settlement and a whole life ahead of him. He told Young he loved to sketch and that he thought it could inspire what he wanted to do, perhaps in designing clothes. Young helped Santana with developing the brand and the design, which was focused around places in Santana's neighborhood of Harlem. Santana explained that Park Avenue was filled with high-rise apartments and doormen, while Madison Avenue actually had the shops and boutiques, so ideally you would live on Park and shop on Madison. Park Madison, New York City became the tribute brand name and has started with the creation of graphic tees, sweatshirts, and hats. His vision, which includes Harlem landmarks like Willie's Burgers and symbols of success like vintage BMW graphics, has been brought to life with the help of designer Dante Wilder. Also featured are images of historical angel statues which Santana said tell a part of my history.
Woo! Right.
Antron McCray was just 15 years old. He was arrested in connection with the rape. It was his own father that instructed him to own up to a crime that he did not commit. His father told him to tell them what they wanted to know, to cooperate and maybe become a witness. Then he could go home. If he didn't, he was going to jail. Antron said, I just kept telling the truth at first. Then they asked to speak to my father. My father left the room with them. When he came back in the room, he had changed. He started cursing, yelling at me, and he said, tell these people what they want to hear so you can go home. His dad was like, I was like, Dad, but I didn't do anything. The police is yelling at me, my father's yelling at me, so I said, all right, I did it. I looked up to my father, he was my hero, but he gave up on me. He knew I was yelling, he knew I was telling the truth. And he told me to lie, Antron said. Antron McCray served 6 years behind bars. He now lives in Georgia with his family and works as a forklift operator. He still struggles with the experience that happened with his father. Sometimes I love him, most of the time I hate him, he said. I lost a lot, for something I didn't do. My dad just flipped on me, and I just can't get past that. It's real hard. I did 7.5 years, including the time I spent detained during the trial for something I didn't do, and I just can't get over it.
Woo! Yusuf Salam was only 15 when he was arrested. He served 6 years and 8 months. Since his release more than 20 years ago, Yusuf had become a family man, father, poet, activist, and inspirational speaker. He has committed himself to support and educate people on the issues of mass incarceration, police brutality, and misconduct, false confession, press ethic and bias, race and law, and the disparities in America's criminal justice system, especially for young men of color. Determined to educate the public, Yusuf eagerly shared his stories with others. As an X-rated African American and an influential speaker, Yusuf has traveled all around the United States and the Caribbean to deliver lectures and facilitate insightful conversations, and he continued to touch lives and raise important questions about race and class, the failing of our criminal justice system, legal protection for vulnerable juveniles, and fundamental human rights.
At the age of 16, Corey was the oldest of the boys who would eventually be known as Central Park 5. When Corey's friend Yusuf Salam was brought in for questioning, and to show support, Corey decided to accompany him. This turned out to be a grave mistake because the police ended up pulling him to the interrogation room as well. And because of his age, he was legally allowed to be questioned by a technical supervision of the parent or guardian. Combine this with the fact that Corey struggled with hearing issues and learning disability, the team was especially vulnerable to the pressures of the detectives' allegedly aggressive questioning. At the end of his interrogation, Corey gave both a written and videotaped confession. The details in his statements didn't match the details of the actual crime and the police, and Corey would eventually say that the police led by Manhattan DA 6 Crimes Unit Linda Fairstein, Corey was submitting a false confession. Corey was sentenced to 5 to 15 years, all of which were to be spent in adult prisons. James was initially sent to Rikers Island, infamous New York City jail. It was a rough time for him, just a kid thrust to a group of adult criminals. Corey was subject to great violence and abuse during his time there and in other federal prisons. Corey also served several years of incarceration locked away in solitary confinement. Eventually, Corey met murderer and serial rapist Mateus Reyes in prison, and Mateus confessed to being the actual lone perpetrator of the Central Park jogger rape. New York started a lawsuit for $41 million for the five for being wrongfully incarcerated, and as the man who had wrongfully served the most time in prison, Corey received the largest portion of the settlement, $12.2 million. At the end of the day, however, Corey will serve more than a decade in prison as an innocent man, and he knows that those of the years settlement won't give him back. You can forgive what you won't forget, he says. You won't forget what you lost. No money can bring that time back. No money can bring the time that was lost, the time life that was missing. Corey was quoted as saying, "I think it's important people understand the depths of what it means to be incarcerated in adult prisons in this country." Despite all that Corey has been through, he keeps a surprisingly positive attitude. Today, Corey lives in New York City, where he works as a public speaker and a criminal justice activist. In 2015, he donated $190,000 to the University of Colorado chapter of the Innocence Project, which then changed its name to the Corey Wise Innocence Project of Colorado Law in his honor.
Woo!
My name is Jai Marks. We hope that you all enjoyed our youth department tributes for Black History Month.
Yes.
All right.
Please give another round of applause
Yes.
for all the young people that performed.
Great job. Great job.
We all appreciate your support, and we will be back with some great things.
All right.
That's all right.
My name is Deja Pass. One of the many things we're proud of during our practices up to today is that we have some Action Reach visitors that are continuing to come out to our great church. So let's be excited about our church making an impact through Action Reach. We would like to welcome to the stage Paul and Wiley Jackson as they give us some more important news about Action Reach and what we all can do to be impactful. Thank you all.